Greetings, friends. My name is Jerrell Ross Richer, and I do a two-way mission in the Ecuadorian rainforest as well as in North America with my wife Jane and our 4 children, Sierra, Naomi, Teresa, and Jordan. Today I'd like to give you an update of our time in the Ecuadorian rainforest in 2019. About a year ago, we had the chance to travel to the village of Sabalo just in time for the Christmas celebration. We had a wonderful time there. I didn't actually take very many photographs, and so I don't have a lot to show you about that experience. The day after the Christmas celebration, there is a village-wide meeting with about 200 attendees. And not only are the new members of the village welcomed, which is what the video just showed, but there was also an election of new officers. Later, we had a chance to return to our communication base in Tena, the place where we have internet and cell phone service, to get ourselves organized there and to check in on someone. We've been telling these stories about a young man who we'll call Ruben, who's a friend of my son Jordan, and how he was orphaned during one of our visits to Sabalo about 2 years ago. We had a chance to check in on him at his new home in Tena, where he's living with an adopted family there, and got to see him play soccer, which was just a privilege. It was wonderful to see Esteban growing in his faith and becoming a part of that community. And our hope is that he'll have a chance to return to Sabalo after he finishes high school, and perhaps even take on a leadership role there. Then later in January, we were invited to be a part of a leadership capacity building program in the village of Shell, which was the home base for the very first evangelical missionaries who came to Ecuador in the 1950s. The guest speaker at this Leadership Development Institute is named Mauricio Chenlo, and he works with Mennonite Mission Network mostly in the United States, but he was paying a visit to Ecuador back in January. And we were hosted by the man sitting there towards the left. That's Clever Mashiant, who is part of the Shuar Nation. In the middle is Julian Waman, a Quechua speaker and teacher, and Peter Wigginton, who is the coordinator of the Mennonite Mission Network team up in the capital city of Quito. We really appreciated getting to know Julian Waman. He is a member of a newly formed church called the Christian Mennonite Church of Ecuador, known by its acronym ICME in Spanish. And Julian is a scholar. He's actually a PhD candidate currently studying the history of the church in Ecuador, and with a particular emphasis on the influence of early Mennonite missionaries over the last really century. Gilberto Nenkimo was another speaker at this event. He is currently the president of the Guarani Nation, and we learned to know him quite a bit better as well. Very charismatic, very outgoing, and an excellent speaker. After the event was over, we met with Clever in the center, our host, as well as Julian, who I've already introduced on the left, and Jose Manuel Waman, the president of that newly formed Mennonite church called the ICME. ICME is located up in the mountains. Most of the congregations are in the Chimborazo province, and there are several also in the province that contains Quito, the nation's capital. That's Pichincha. And it was a blessing to be with them on, I believe it was their first visit to this part of the Ecuadorian rainforest. Well, next we had a chance to return to the Ninawachi Mission Institute, where we have had the opportunity of visiting several times every year. We've gotten to know some of the students and faculty quite well during our times. Pictured there with my daughter Teresa and also my daughter Naomi is a young woman named Betty. And Betty is the first COFAN student studying at Ninawachi. She got set up there to study a year ago, and it was wonderful to come back and connect with her and see how she's doing. Excuse me. Oh, boy. Okay. Now, the reason why we visited Ninawachi this first time here in 2019 was for a road trip. We picked up 7 students and faculty members at the Institute, along with Betty, the Kofan student, to travel to the home community of the Kofans. That's Sablo, the village where we spent Christmas. It was a wonderful time. We were accompanied by the man pictured in the center of this picture. That's Lauren Hostetter, who lives in Quito with his wife, Glenda Segrist, who is a nurse at the US Embassy. Lauren's involved in community development projects and wanted a chance to go and visit the village of Sablo and offered to drive his vehicle and to take some of the Ninawachi indigenous students with him. So we traveled from Tena to Ninawachi. The Mission Institute is indicated there at the tip of that blue arrow. And first drove to the community of Dureno before we headed out to Sablo, which is in the red circle there. Now we went to Dureno to go and pick up Betty's parents. Her father, Delphine, pictured there on the right in the red hat, was one of the original translators of the Kofan Bible. And his mother, which is Mama Kashi there to the left, we had never met before. And here's Jane talking to Mama Kashi. She was originally from Colombia, but came to Dureno and spent the rest of her life there, got married to a man, and was involved in that original translation work as well. So it's exciting to make that connection. Well, this is one of the real highlights of 2019. We've been working in the village of Sabalo since our first visit there in 2015. And here we were about 4 years later, being able to participate in the very first baptism. So the leaders of the Sabalo Church are Iter, pictured there on the left, and his brother Mimi on the right. For a while, it was just Iter and members of his family who were trying to raise up the church again. And a lot of prayers were prayed. Iter hoping, wishing, asking God for some support from his family. And about 1.5 years ago, Carlos, who people know as Mimi, which means hummingbird in the Siona language, committed his life to Christ, had a dramatic transformation. We were also accompanied at the baptism by leaders of the Dureno Kofan Church. This is Pastor Wilson, pictured there at the podium, and about 60 members of his church that came to visit Sabalo and really packed the place out. It was a wonderful time together. We definitely noticed the influence of Mimi as a new leader of the church. He's very charismatic and outgoing, and is somebody who's motivated a lot of children and has a lot of leadership ability. So I'd like to play you a song that Mimi taught the children and led in, I guess, what you might call a children's choir on this particular Sunday. That's a song in Kofan, and you may have heard the word abuhatsi, which means happiness. And the point of the song is that giving our lives to Christ brings true happiness. Well, it was quite an event. Not only were some of the leadership from Doreno and the local leadership from Sablo featured, but there was also some speaking and some music from the members of the Ninawachi Mission Institute. So here I'm pictured introducing Santi, or Santiago, who is the new director of the Institute.
Abre mis ojos, oh Cristo, abre mis ojos, te pido, yo quiero verte, yo quiero verte. Abre mis ojos, oh Cristo, abre mis ojos, te pido, yo quiero verte, yo quiero verte.
So featured in that video were 4 different indigenous groups from the Ecuadorian rainforest. People that speak Quechua and Shuar and Guarani, as well as Kofan, and then a couple of people who are Spanish speakers from the Tena area. Well, we also heard music from Charles Yoguaje, Iter's son, and other youth from the community. Charles, as he was preparing to be baptized, told us a story of a dramatic dream that he had, which revealed to him his calling. In the dream, he is attacked by a creature, a monster, I guess you could call it, and needs God's help to be freed from that creature. And after he is shown the promised land. He's shown paradise, heaven. But he's also told that it's not time yet for him to go there. And first, he has a lot of work to do here on earth. Well, the baptisms began. And the baptism was originally going to be for Betty, but by the time we got there this Sunday, there were 6 people who were prepared to give their lives to Christ. Pictured in the middle here is Pastor Leoncio, who is the senior leader at the Kofan Church way upriver in Doreno. I mentioned a group of 60 people came from Doreno, but I should tell you that that's an 8-hour ride. And I think this is the first time in several years that they had made the trip all the way to Saulo. And so it was nice to have a reunion of Christians in this context. There is the group of candidates praying before the baptism began. And I'll go through these next pictures without saying very much. I'll just tell you the name of the person being baptized. That is Carlos, or Mimi Yoguaje. Charles Yoguaje. Gustavo. Isolina. Betty. And Fernanda. And here is John at the end of the ceremony out there on the Agua Rico River beach. Well, it was an absolutely beautiful day. And it turned out that this is our last day in Sablo this year. Actually, I stand corrected. The last day in Sablo is coming with the next visit. Sorry about that. Okay, so here we are with people in the boat, ready to head back up the Agua Rico River, the Ninawachi Institute students and our family. Well, we developed a new idea, something that Jay and I have been thinking about for a while in response to Pastor Ita's request. Um, Several years ago, Ita suggested that it would be wonderful if he would have an opportunity to study the Bible outside of his community for a concentrated period, a long weekend, or maybe 4 to 5 days in a place away from home. Ita is a very capable person and very involved in the life of the community. He needs to hunt and to fish, to provide for 11 children. He, as a very responsible person, is also the head of the equivalent of the Parent-Teacher Association at the local elementary school in the village of Savalo, and is called upon to do so many things, given his skill in carpentry. And so Jay and I had been tossing around the idea for a while of a mobile institute. And what we decided to do is to bring together Kofans from the village of Savalo, pictured in the green circle here, way out on the eastern edge of the country, and to gather them with a teacher from that new Ikme congregation, Julian Waman, who I'll talk more about here in a moment, who is from this red zone up in the mountains of Ecuador, and to bring them together in a place in the middle. So Tena is literally in the middle of these two different, very different locations. So the place where we gathered for a week back in February is Establo Tomas, Tomas's stable. It's kind of a budget eagle lodge, if you will, located along the river with comfortable basic accommodations. And this is a place where we've often had North American visitors stay during our learning and fellowship tours. And it seemed a fitting location for what we were about to do with the Kofan. We traveled upriver with 6 members of the Kofan community. That is Michelle, who is driving the boat there in the rear, in the center of the picture, with her father Mimi on the left and her mother Isolini on the right. Mimi and Isolina were baptized, of course. Ita is facing the other direction, and his daughter Kendra is to the right. And so those were 5 of the attendees, and the other one was the young man Charles, who had just been baptized as well, Ita's son. And here we are pictured doing Bible study for an entire week in this relatively isolated location, a great place to study the Bible, in this case, both in Spanish as well as in the Kofan language, with an incredibly gifted teacher. Jay and I had spent a weekend at our home with Julian Waman, the scholar from the Christian Mennonite Church of Ecuador, ICME. He's a Quechua speaker at birth and has learned Spanish and is currently studying Christianity in his particular indigenous context up in the mountains. And he was very curious about what life is like in indigenous communities in the rainforest, given his relatively little experience there. So he suggested that we use this material. In English, it's called Begin Anew. And it's there's a 4-part series here. And we spent this week working on the first part. What does it mean to believe in God? With plans to do the other parts in future weeks. We did the study in Spanish, but with Bibles and a lot of conversation happening in the Kofan language as well. And it was a blessing to have an indigenous teacher teaching indigenous believers. There was so much that the Quechua have in common with the Kofan in so many different ways that Julian could relate to our Kofan brothers and sisters, frankly, much better than Jane and I could. But it was a blessing for Jane and I to be at the table, as well as our daughter Naomi, pictured there to the right, to help facilitate the conversation and to offer some of our perspective as well. In the afternoons, we had a chance to do what indigenous people love to do, like swim in the river there right next to the lodge, and just to enjoy a lot of conversation and fellowship together. So in this photo, we have Isolina to the left and her husband Mimi, the new church leader there, next to her, talking with me, and then Julian Waman listening there on the right. Well, God is good. And after this workshop was finished, the Kofan headed back to the rainforest, and we headed up into the mountains instead, and ended up in the capital city of Quito, where we had a chance to celebrate a really important event with other Mennonites. This was the Ecuador Partnership visit, and the partnership is made up of people from Mennonite Mission Network, from church members from the Central Plains Conference of the Mennonite Church, as well as representatives of the Colombian Mennonite Church. And we were celebrating the fact that the Mennonites had had about 30 years working in Ecuador, and about 20 years specifically with the Quito Mennonite Church. So the banner on the right says, Jehovah is my shepherd, I shall not want, an allusion to the 23rd Psalm. Peter Wigginton, who I pictured earlier at the leadership conference that he helped to organize, is here on the right with members of the Quito Mennonite Church, as well as several people from this particular church. The church that we're worshiping at was one of the big congregations of the new denomination, ICME, which is I'll call it an indigenous denomination of the Mennonite Church, with most of the members speaking Quechua, but Spanish as well. Here are some Quechua-speaking women that were singing a song and doing a dance in worship of God that was just absolutely marvelous. Later, Jay and I participated in a series of meetings with the leadership of these different organizations that are part of the Ecuador Partnership. This photo was taken upstairs at the Quito Mennonite Church. We also worshiped there on one Sunday morning. Pictured on the left is Alexandra, who is on the pastoral leadership team here at Quito Mennonite Church, and then members of the praise band to the right. This photo was taken with Stanley Green. He was the outgoing director of Mennonite Mission Network at the time this photo was taken last March. He has since retired, and it was a blessing to be with him on his last international trip for Mennonite Mission Network. And then here we are pictured with members of the Ecuador Partnership. And so from the left, we have some Colombian representatives. That is Germán and Pedro. Linda Shelley is in the middle in blue. She's from Mennonite Mission Network and the Latin America director, kind of our boss. Stanley Green, the director of Mennonite Mission Network, is in the middle. And then next to him are two members of the Central Plains Conference of the Mennonite Church. That's Holly Blosser Yoder and her son Jacob, representing youth. They're from Iowa. So we took the group down to the rainforest and stopped again at the Ninawachi Mission Institute. I don't get photos of the worship space very often, but these photos were taken by Linda Shelley, and so I'm happy that she had her camera out. And Ninawachi means the place of fire. And it literally is a place where we can meet in a circle with a fire in the middle and think about the power of God within us, within this body of believers who represent indigenous cultures from all over the rainforest. Betty, there, third from the left, standing, is introducing herself. And to hear her, a woman who we knew as being very shy, very quiet, to stand up with confidence and introduce herself and kind of, be our host in a certain way at the Institute was just a small miracle. Thanks be to God. We also had an opportunity to share some music ourselves, and Jaden Hostetter, who is serving a 2-year term, mostly up at the Quito Mennonite Church, came with us on this visit, and he's the one playing guitar there on the left. And then my wife Jane, of course, in the middle, and then several students of the Institute. Like always, my daughter's had a chance to check in with Betty to find out how things are going for her. It's a struggle, in part because she is learning a second language, Spanish, which she did not know very well from school or life in her community. And is learning how to read the Bible and commentaries and to speak in this language that we hope and trust will be very helpful to her in the future as she takes on a role of leadership in the Kofan Church. There we are, headed down the road, and we're on the road to Sabalo again. This is a journey that our family makes at least once a month. Linda took this picture from the back of the mission vehicle from Quito, and the vehicle up there in the front is the car that we drive when we're in Ecuador. It's a big 1995 Land Cruiser, kind of a beast, but it's great for hauling lots of stuff. We lost our license plate during a recent river crossing. That's why our license plate was a piece of paper in the top left window there. But this truck has just been very reliable in getting us all over the rainforest. To get to Ecuador, this part of Ecuador, the Sablo village in particular, takes about 5 hours moving down the Agua Rica River, and here we are loading up gasoline for the trip and our luggage, covering things for plastic since it often rains as we head down. And here we are with members of the Ecuador Partnership. I've introduced several of these people, but two in the middle deserve to be introduced. One is Alba in the center, in the front row there. She was a member of the Quito Mennonite Church and has a leadership role there. And then Jose Manuel, who you may remember, the leader of the Ikme Church up in the mountains, coming down to this part of the jungle for the first time. Well, it was an amazing cultural experience. This little monkey is a pet. It's a squirrel monkey. This is the daughter of Mimi, and Mimi and his wife Isolina agreed to actually host the members of this delegation, as well as Iter and his wife Irene. And so that was a new experience, having a chance for our visitors to not stay in the lodge, that's the place that's set up for visitors, but to instead be in the homes of two of the church leaders. This sign in Spanish says, La aventura comienza aquí, the adventure begins here. And certainly life in Sablo is always an adventure. This was a surprise. Linda Shelley, our boss, took these photos as she was walking towards our house. As you get a little closer, we see a venomous snake. This is an equis, an X snake in Spanish. And it's called that because of the pattern on its back that loosely resembles an X, I guess. And this is a vicious, deadly snake. And to see a snake this big, posing a little bit like a cobra does here, with its nostrils flared, so to speak, and ready to strike, just reminds us of the real danger that comes with life in this part of the jungle. This is a physical danger, and there are obviously other dangers as well. And in some ways, this photo and this encounter that Linda and Pastor Jose Manuel and other members of this delegation had with this snake represents the spiritual battles that are happening in this part of the world. As the church grows in Sablo, I think there will be increasing opposition, and we must be careful. So here's the home fire of Irene. She and Pastor Iter were hosts of 4 of the members of this 8-person delegation. That's actually Isolina, Mimi's wife, and so Irene's sister-in-law standing behind the fire as food is being prepared. All the meals were taken at Iter and Irene's home, and the food was very much Kofan food. This is a banana soup, a soup made out of plantain. They ate lots of fish and drank lots of banana drink, and I think really had an authentic experience. Here's the church in Sablo. I showed you photos earlier of the inside of the church, but here's what it looks on the outside. And we again had some wonderful opportunities to worship God in this sanctuary with a big group of congregants. Again, Mimi on the left and his brother Ita on the right. Here is our little group, our delegation, with some children and adults and youth from this Church of Sablo. We had the opportunity to sing and to read scripture and to share. And near the end of the service here on the last evening, I was asked to come forward and to say a blessing for this group. I think there are maybe 13 people who responded to the invitation to give their hearts to Christ and to become baptized at the next opportunity, which we're hoping will be in January of 2021. So coming up very soon. It was amazing to be in the presence of the people pictured here. We know them, some we know very well, and for some it was kind of a surprise that they were deciding to change things in their own lives. and to turn away from some of the self-destructive behaviors, some of the behaviors that were not life-giving to them and their families, and turn things over to Christ. And so we're excited to see this tremendous growth of the church, and have to thank God for this, and have to especially be thankful for the involvement of people like Mimi, who has had a dramatic transformation in his own life. Well, we also had some fun outside of church during this visit, the partnership visit. Here is Peter, the coordinator of our team from Quito, playing music with Iter at his home here in Sabalo. Let me take you out to the river and show you some photos. These photos were taken on a day trip. Mimi and Iter took us to the Sabalo River. Here's Jacob. And we had a chance to do a little cruise up this Blackwater River and to see some wildlife. Here we are posed together off the boat a little bit. We had a chance to hike and to go to a tree where there were lots of birds, as well as to see monkeys. Later on, we came back and had the opportunity to see some of the artisanry, some of the jewelry that the women of the community make. Pictured there in the center was the hostess of this group, and that's Irene, the wife of Iter. One more worship service. And then a couple of things that happened on our very last day. So here are my children, Teresa, they're in the middle to the left, and Naomi to the right. On Naomi's side, the little boy there is Javier, and closer to Teresa on the left of our frame is Jessica. And so those are two of the really sweet young friends that our children have in Sabalo. And here we are gathered on what turned out to be the last day of our time in Sabalo this year. It was only March, but you all know what happened that changed 2020. Here we are kind of goofing around. People are having fun, enjoying this time, late afternoon on the beach. The little boy on the front is Kiki, this Eddie, his brother, his younger brother. And he looks like he's about to jump off the boat here. And there's Jacob and Jaden and Rolando. And I think that must be Davies in the back driving the boat. Had a lot of fun this time, kind of a surprise. Here's Jordan water skiing. It's not exactly what you might imagine water skiing usually looks like. He's literally on a board, like a piece of wood. Nothing special there, but able to hold on. And he's being towed by this little canoe with the 15 horsepower motor. So we just had a lot of fun on that very last visit. Well, 2020 was obviously a year of unprecedented events. And when our family returned on March the 13th, that was Friday the 13th of March 2020, everything had changed. We were asked by the owner of a restaurant, as we were bringing the partnership group back to the Tena area, if we were carrying COVID-19. And I said, I don't think we are. But obviously, our ministry had to take a turn. Due to COVID and due to the sanctions and the restrictions on mobility, we were not allowed to leave our house except for twice a week, and then later on just once a week. There's a curfew imposed every single day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so we were not able to visit any more churches or to do any of the other activities that we would typically do. But on those mornings when we did have a chance to get out and go to the store, we would buy supplies like this, a big bag of rice, some oil, some seasonings, salt, sardines, and lentils, and to package them up in little kits and distribute them to our neighbors. We did this with a note, and this note, I'll read it to you here in Spanish and then translate it for you. Vecinos, la red Mennonita de misión donó fondos para ayudar durante la crisis. Esperemos que sea una bendición. Caminando juntos, vamos a superar. Estamos en las manos de Dios. Dios bendice a tu familia Rosricher. Neighbors, Mennonite Mission Network has donated funds to help out during this crisis. We hope that this will be a blessing to you. Walking together, we will overcome. We are all in God's hands. May God bless you. The Ross Richer family. The note was written in Spanish with the last blessing in the Quechua language, since the neighbors in this part of Tena are Quechua speakers by birth. So we would load up our car with 10 or 15 of these kits packed in rice bags, and most of us stayed in the car, and Jane and Naomi distributed them to our neighbors. This is a little neighborhood called Mushuk Kausai, and we also distributed them in a more rural part of Tena, as well as going to a couple churches in the nearby area. We donated food to several different pastors' families that they would then distribute to the members of the congregation. Just like in the United States, there's a lot of unemployment and economic hardship due to the presence of COVID-19. And without work, people didn't have very much to eat. And so this is one way that we could help out. Well, we lasted about 5 weeks under quarantine in our house until it finally became clear in the middle of April that our family needed to return to Ecuador. We knew that we would not be doing any more of our regular two-way mission supporting churches there. So rather than be a burden on the local health system in case we would get the disease, the virus, instead of eating food from the stores that really should be made available to the locals, we decided to come back to Goshen and finished the last several months of our term there. Well, what plans do we have for 2021? I'll have to tell you that COVID-19 is still a problem in the Ecuadorian rainforest. And in fact, just several days ago, the Ecuadorian government imposed a 30-day emergency, reinstating the curfew that was imposed earlier and limiting travel between provinces. So as missionaries, we certainly don't want to be people who might inadvertently be spreading the virus asymptomatically. And as I mentioned earlier, we also don't want to be consuming resources that are precious and scarce and that local people would need, given that we can't really travel and visit churches and do the kind of work we typically do. This also was a different fall for us. Here's a map showing where we make presentations. And as you can see from the map, we didn't do any traveling in the fall of 2020. We typically would have visited Bethel Mennonite Church and Holdeman Mennonite Church, and we would have made a presentation at Waterford Mennonite Church, our home congregation. I might have gone out on my own to Mountain View Mennonite Church in Upland, California. There could have been other presentations as well, but that just didn't happen due to travel restrictions and the desire to keep our family and the people around us safe. And so 2021 is going to be a different year. When Jane and I had an opportunity to write about the last 3 years of our ministry in Ecuador, which would have been the second 3-year term that we've had in preparation for our third 3-year term, which is about to begin here in January of 2021, we realized that that we're missing some things. Let me just say it that way. Jane and I know Spanish, but we've struggled a lot with trying to learn a non-Western language like Kofan or Quechua. We know a lot about theology and Christianity, having attended churches all of our lives, but we've never had the chance to formally study theology, especially from an indigenous perspective. And so in the year 2021, we're going to do something very different. We have enrolled in classes at the Canadian Institute of Linguistics. This is a branch of the Summer Institute of Linguistics, which is part of the original Wycliffe Bible Translator group. Jane and I will both be taking a class called Articulatory Phonetics, Learning the International Phonetic Alphabet, so that when we listen to the Kofan language in the village of Sabalo or the Quechua language around the area of Tena, we can write down what we hear precisely. And after we wrote that down, we can study our notes and then learn to replicate some of those sounds. I'll also be taking a class in phonological analysis, how you string sounds together, how you actually pronounce things to make sense. Jane will be taking a class called Language and Society about this interaction between language and these indigenous communities that use non-Western languages, as well as a mix of Kofan and Spanish, or Quechua and Spanish. And we're incredibly excited about having the opportunity to actually learn some tools that we hope to be able to apply when we return to Sablo and to Tena, God willing, in January of 2022. What about theology? We have had a chance to do a little bit of reading this fall, Jane especially, and we found an author who teaches at this organization called NAITS, the North American Institute for Indigenous Theological Studies. And we are registered for 2 classes that will begin in January, a class on theology from an indigenous perspective and a class on Old Testament. Again, examining some of the stories and the teachings and the law, the prophecy, the poetry of the Old Testament from a Native American perspective, given some of the similarities between Native American cultures here in North America and the cultures that were existent at the time that the Bible was written, both the Old and the New Testament. So we are really excited about the chance to do this. It's going to be a busy spring for us. We will have a full load, Jane and I each taking 4 classes, half of them in linguistics and half of them in theology. But we are really excited about the chance to be students and to work on our skill set, to develop the ability to better hear and to replicate the sounds of Kofan and Quechua, as well as the ability to share biblical perspectives with indigenous believers in South America, relying on what we learned from indigenous believers up here in the global north. Well, a couple more things. Very recently, we've had sketchy but occasional contact with people down in the Ecuadorian rainforest. This is a photo that I showed earlier in the presentation, taken in Iter Yaguaje's house in Sabalo. And I'd like to feature one person in the photo. That woman there, circled in white, sitting next to my daughter Naomi, that is Kendra Yaguaje. This is Iter and Irene's oldest daughter. And we learned that she has decided to accept the call, the invitation of some of the faculty members at Ninawachi to study there. And so she has joined her cousin Betty, and we now have 2 Kofans studying the Bible in this 2-year program at Ninawachi, the place of fire. So we're so excited and know that God has plans for both of these dear women, and also hope that they'll just be the first who decide to leave the village and spend some time learning what it means to follow Christ in an indigenous context with believers from other tribes. What else is new? Well, this photo I showed earlier as well, with I think 13 people who had chosen to follow Christ. We've been keeping in contact. About a week ago, we spoke over the phone with Iter, who had left his community and was in a place outside Sablo that had cell service for a short visit to the Doreno church. And he told us that there are now maybe 30 people who are interested in being baptized. They have chosen a date, January 9 is the travel date. That's a Saturday. And then the baptism, God willing, will happen on Sunday, January 10. So please pray that, that this baptism will be a blessing, obviously to those that decide to follow Christ, as well as to other members of the community who are looking on and kind of wondering what it might mean for them to commit their lives to following God. When we return in our 3rd term, which we hope will be January of 2022, we will continue doing what we have done before. And so that will be working alongside church leaders like Iter. It'll mean discipling young people, like a young man named Camilo, who was visiting our home every afternoon in Sablo during our last several visits. and asking questions based on his reading of the Gospel of Matthew. We hope to continue these Mobile Institute workshops. We were only able to do one of them this year, and then because we had to return, we were not able to do Unit 2 and Unit 3 and Unit 4 from the curriculum that Jose Manuel and Julian Roman were planning to offer for us. And so we really hope that we'll be able to continue that work, probably with even more participants from Sablo and elsewhere. We will continue to think about ways to bring North Americans to Ecuador, to bring people from other indigenous communities in Ecuador together as well, through things like the Mobile Institute. We will be supporting youth programs in the Tena area. We have a good friend, Angel, and his wife, Mariuxi, who work with young people through a soccer ministry. And so it'll be fun to continue to be involved in that. Some of the groups that may come in 2022 and 23 and beyond would include a group from Mennonite men in the United States, and maybe people from Goshen College, and perhaps another fellowship and learning tour for older people that have the time and energy and would love to come and see what God is doing in the jungle. And then Jane and I have proposed to offer, I think, 3 different workshops at the Mennonite Convention, which will be held in 2021, the month of July this year in Cincinnati. And so we're so looking forward to being there. Perhaps we'll even see some of you there. Well, God is good. And I want to express my gratitude for your sharing, for your generosity, for your support for our 2-way mission in the Ecuadorian rainforest. Thank you so much for your prayers and for all that you have done to make this possible. I'm sorry that Jane and I cannot come and visit you as we usually would, but we are happy to be able to have a chance to share pictures and images and stories with you through this electronic medium. And hopefully we'll catch up next time in person. Blessings to you. May you have a wonderful 2021. Amen.